It's the Growing for Market podcast.
Family connection through my midwife introduced me to this man, Roberto, who came to work for me. Within a couple of weeks, he was on board. And I remember he didn't even know what kale was. He had never seen a lot of the vegetables we grow. He grew up in Guanajuato, Mexico, and had been here since he was 13, but had been working as a brush picker and as, in construction. So a lot of what we did was new to him. So I think I started him at minimum wage, and literally within a week, I'd given him a $3 an hour raise because he was so above and beyond amazing in his ability to learn and be quick and get the quality. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing vegetables and flowers for local markets like farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, and local wholesaling. I'm Katie Kulla, your host and a writer for Growing for Market magazine. For 32 years, the only magazine devoted solely to flower and vegetable market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Every fall on our farm, we order a couple sling bags of Fort V potting soil from Vermont Compost. Over the years, we've tried a lot of the compost and potting soil options out there, from making our own to buying off the shelf. And we keep coming back to Vermont Compost, both for overall quality and batch-to-batch consistency. It's that consistency that keeps us coming back. There are so many variables that affect how good your seedlings are. We know Vermont Compost will give our plants the best possible foundation, so we can stick to worrying about all the other stuff and not the potting soil. With Vermont Compost Company's pre-buy program, you can receive 15% off on orders placed, paid for, and shipped by December 21st. Listeners of the Growing for Market podcast will receive an additional 5%, bringing the total discount to 20%. Visit vermontcompost.com/GFM for more details, or mention this podcast when you place your order. Start 2024 off right with Local Line. Local Line is the all-in-one sales platform for direct market farms and food hubs. Increase your sales and streamline your processes with features including e-commerce, inventory management, subscriptions, online payments, and more. Trusted by thousands of farmers across North America, Local Line is the platform you need to take your farm to the next level. Subscriptions start as low as $39 per month. Try Local Line today and receive a free premium feature for 1 year and receive 15% off Local Line's marketing services using the coupon code GROWINGFORMARKET. That coupon code is GROWING, the number 4, market, Growing for Market, all one word, for 15% off Local Line's marketing services and 1 free premium feature for a year at Local Line.
Hi, everyone. Today, I am talking with Zoe Bradbury DeSurra, co-owner of Valley Flora Farm near Langlois, Oregon. Zoe runs Valley Flora as a collective with her mother, Betsy, and sister, Abby. The farm team, which includes draft horses, employees, and as Zoe says, trillions of soil microorganisms, thousands of pollinators, 1 little tractor, and 12 kilowatts of solar power, grows hundreds of varieties of vegetables, berries, and fruit to feed their local coastal community year-round. The farm was founded in 1998 with a commitment to organic farming practices and a desire to strengthen community-based food systems on the southern Oregon coast. Valley Flora grows produce for a 130-member CSA, farm stand, U-Pick, local food banks, and a number of stores, restaurants, and co-ops. Zoe also co-authored and edited the 2012 book of farmers' essays called The Greenhorns, 50 Dispatches from the New Farmers Movement. Zoe, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm super excited to talk about your farm's unique family-based structure, as well as all the other interesting things you have going on at Valley Flora. Let's start at the beginning. I like starting there. How did you all get to where you are today?
Well, thank you for having me. It's fun to connect. We've known each other in our past lives, and it's been a while. So hi.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Well, the story of the farm honestly really begins before I was alive. My parents serendipitously stumbled upon the 40 acres in the early 70s. At the time, they were living in Bandon, which is the town just a little north of us, and they were running a little short order restaurant, making milkshakes and frying burgers for the church crowd on Sunday. And
Oh, sweet. I didn't know that. Oh.
yeah, and somehow my dad stumbled across the property, and it turned out that the woman who owned it really wanted a beachfront property because she had interest in building a little hotel. And anyway, they ended up doing a trade. So they traded the restaurant for the farm.
Oh,
Which
wow.
in retrospect, I think must have been just the greatest thing that ever happened in human history from my perspective. Langlois is a tiny little town of 300 people. My dad grew up in Chicago. My mom was born in New York City. They were definitely West Coast transplants. And I don't think either of them necessarily, it's not like they got into it thinking we're going to have a farm. Or honestly, my dad actually passed away this year. And if there was one thing I could bring him back and ask him, it was, how did you know that this was such a special place and would unfurl into this family legacy and history for multiple generations at this point? So anyway, they ended up with the place in the early 80s. My dad actually ended up getting into elected office. So he served his whole life in public office in Oregon. So he really wasn't particularly involved in the day-to-day. But my mom was, she originally was really skeptical about the whole idea. And in the end, it's become her entire life and lifestyle and the place that is deeply home for her. So, and for us. So Abby and I, my older sister and I, were born there, grew up there, and we both went away to college. I was gone for actually about 15 years total, but in the end, we both circled back. I think the gravitational pull of Flores Creek, where the farm is located, and the property is just deeply embedded in us, and it's the center of our universe. So I guess it was inevitable that we might both find our way back. Both of us studied ecology, environmental studies, sustainable ag related things in college. And after, kind of a winding journey for me through the nonprofit world and grad school, I ultimately came back in 2008. And that was the point when the three of us, my mom and sister and I, hatched Valley Flora. So prior to that, starting in 1998, my mom and sister had been doing some small scale production, Abby doing salad greens, and my mom, Betsy, doing some greenhouse production of peppers and tomatoes and summer stuff. And when I came back, we joked that we took it to the bridge, so to speak, to quote one of our favorite songs from James Brown. But our property is stretched out along Flores Creek, and all the bottom land and the really prime growing area is down there. So at that point, we deer fenced 9 acres of that all the way to the bridge, which is the bridge that crosses the creek.
Oh,
if
yeah.
going out to Highway 101 from our place. So we took it to the bridge. And at that point, Valley Flora came into existence, as well as these 3 other businesses, which is sort of what I think we're going to be getting into.
Yeah.
But pretty unique family structure of ownership, really, and collective management. So at this point, 15 years since the inception of Valley Flora, like you said, we have a 130 member CSA, farm stand, U-Pick, lots of wholesale accounts, and we go year round. The farm's growing over, a few hundred different varieties of things. We have a mature orchard, strawberry production, blueberries, and lots of annual row crops as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a great, busy place.
Yeah. So I want to ask about the structure, but I also want to talk a little bit more about this special land. So you said it's 40 acres and some of it's lower.
Yeah.
It sounds like, and it came with a house because you were raised there. So can you give us sort of a lay of the land of what you have there? And what is the proximity to the ocean? Because I know it's a coastal community, but obviously you're not at the beach. That was the whole point of the magical trade, right?
Yes. And that is actually part of the magic, is our exact geoclimatic location because the coast is not necessarily an easy place to grow produce, especially the closer you get to the beach. In Oregon, we have, kind of a ripping north wind in the summertime, a lot of fog, and it can be chilly. So if you are standing on the beach on the edge of the Pacific Ocean looking east, our place is about 3 miles as the crow flies inland. But what happens is where we are in Langlois, we have this sort of wide coastal plain that's about 2 miles wide. And there's a lot of ranching, cattle grazing, sheep, hay production, cranberry production going on out there. But the Coast Range drops down to that coastal plain. And there's all these little wild rivers that flow back into the Coast Range. And our river is Flores Creek. So basically it carves its way up through the Coast Range, and our place is located about a mile and a half inland, tucked between 2 ridges of the Coast Range. And it creates this very, very special little microclimate where we're protected from that north wind, from the fog. It's usually in the summertime easily 20 degrees warmer at the farm than it is at the beach, just in a few miles distance. So it's a climate that allows us to grow brassicas and head lettuce and cool weather crops beautifully, but it also is enough to let us grow eggplant and sweet corn and tomatoes and peppers outside also. So, and it's comfortable, we don't deal with such extreme heat in this day and age that a lot of people are dealing with in the Willamette Valley or elsewhere further inland, and also not as cold in the winter. So we do get frost, and last winter we actually got our fair share of snow, which was very rare, although weather and climate are bizarre anymore. So who knows what's normal anymore.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. But that said, all things considered, the ocean is really this moderating influence not too far away to keep us from getting too hot and too cold most of the time. And the river itself has, been dropping its load of sediment for millennia on that bottomland. So our soil is very special, deep, lovely, sort of silty loam that makes our job fairly easy in that regard. The property itself is actually now 90 acres. It started as 40, and then over the years we acquired another 50. So we have about 20 acres of bottomland, and the rest of it is more hillside, pasture, and forest. So that supports, the forest will just keep being forest forever until it's happy old growth and a climax community. We don't have any intention of harvesting that, but the pasture supports a small flock of sheep and my draft horses and sometimes my daughter's miniature donkeys.
Oh, sweet.
Which are a fun little part of the place. A loud, sometimes part of the place.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So my mom lives in the house on the property where we were born and grew up. My sister and I live actually in Langlois. So we commute to the farm a big mile and a half from our respective houses in the village. Yeah. And we all spend most of our waking hours up there together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about that, how you all are farming together. I feel like the concept of the family farm is, of course, the classic image people have of farming, but usually that means either like a patriarchal lineage of grandfather to father to son, maybe like we have a lot of these farms in our area. There's nothing against it. That's one image. Or you have the farm family of like the nuclear family, but you guys have a totally different thing going here. You have a mom and 2 daughters, grown daughters, and you also are running the farm, it seems like in a very intentional way, so as to have both cooperation, but also some level of business autonomy too. Can you talk about how you've set that up? And I think that's really interesting because I know from my experience with farms in our area, there can be a lot of challenges that sometimes can even break a farm up when people haven't been intentional about how they set up succession plans, who's in charge of what. I've talked to farmers who grew up on a farm, went to work there again, had all this knowledge and never were able to have that autonomy. And so they just felt like, what am I doing here? I'm in my 40s and I still can't make decisions about this farm.
Yeah.
So anyhow, from a distance, it seems like you all have been very intentional about setting something up that works for all 3 of you. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, it definitely is a matriarchy. Let's start there.
Okay. Yes.
I mean, our whole lives have been. I mean, my mom mostly raised us, and she's the kind of person who can, knit a sweater or fire up the chainsaw and everything in between. She's always been an incredibly capable go-getter kind of role model. So we grew up with that. And I think it rubbed off to a certain extent on both of us, Abby and I.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
I am so excited to welcome Bootstrap Farmer as a sponsor of the podcast. I've known them for a dozen years, and if anyone tells you nothing is made in the USA anymore, well, they're headquartered and warehoused in Paris, Texas. They make their own all-metal, all-inclusive greenhouse frames of steel made in the USA and fabricated in Texas, and their heavy-duty, reusable propagation and microgreens trays are Midwest-made. With a complete range of supplies, they have just about everything for propagation and growing, including heat mats, ground cover, frost blankets, silage tarps, irrigation, and trellising. Want to color code your seed starting flats? They've got heavy-duty trays that will last for years in a full range of colors, great for keeping farm seedlings separate from retail or just for fun. And they have an experienced team of growers to support everything they sell. If you've heard of the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative providing grants for hoop houses, but have been put off by the paperwork, Bootstrap Farmer has a guide that will walk you through the application process so you can get your hoop house funded this winter. For all that and more, check out Bootstrap Farmer at bootstrapfarmer.com. There's a lot of talk these days about the value of certification. With the growing distrust of labels and customers who are more savvy than ever, farmers need better options to showcase their commitment to truly sustainable growing practices. Certified Naturally Grown is a peer-review certification focused on the highest ideals of the organic movement. They keep costs low and paperwork to a minimum, so you can keep focused on farming. CNG's peer-to-peer approach encourages knowledge exchange and strengthens regional networks. See why farmers throughout North America are choosing Certified Naturally Grown and apply today at naturallygrown.org. If you're an experienced vegetable farmer, don't miss out on the 2024 Organic Vegetable Production Conference. In its 8th year, this conference fills that expert-level niche you're looking for. Farmer presenters share the nitty-gritty details of their production practices and also speak on a wide range of topics, from fertilizer injectors and pest management with beneficials to seed saving and labor retention. With online sessions on January 25th and 26th and in-person sessions on February 2nd and 3rd in Madison, Wisconsin, you can plug in no matter where you are. Register today at tinyurl.com/26285AX5 or just search Organic Vegetable Production Conference, University of Wisconsin, and you'll find it.
And now back to the show.
She has been amazing in her ability to welcome us back into the fold, because she spent her whole life creating her place there and loves her lifestyle. And I mean, it's inarguable that in particular, when I returned in 2008, things got a lot more chaotic because the farm really started growing at that point, and there was a lot of change. And as we went into that, as we started sitting down together in 2007, 2006, as it became apparent that I was going to return and wanted to grow food there as well, we tried to figure out what is the best way to do this. And that traditional model of like we all are one business or we're in a partnership, it struck all of us as problematic because my mom and sister already kind of had their thing going.
Yeah, what were they doing at that point? You said it was a little bit smaller, so what did that look like?
Yeah, much smaller scale. So my sister, Abby, she started growing salad greens actually when she was still in college, and it was kind of her summer gig.
Okay.
And what happened essentially is that she was going to school in Vermont. Her college boyfriend was Pete Johnson of Pete's Greens, he's one of the biggest farmers in Vermont, organic farmers, great guy. And for his senior thesis project at Middlebury College, where they were at school, he built a greenhouse on campus, and he was growing salad mix through the winter in an unheated greenhouse in Vermont. And that was his thesis, which was pretty awesome. And so my sister helped him build that greenhouse and grow those crops. And, she kind of had this epiphany. She thought, well, if you could do this in the winter in Vermont, in an unheated greenhouse, you can certainly do this outside in the summer in Oregon. And so we had spent like our first 2 working summers when we were in our teens working for a landscaper. And we were pretty tired of shoveling pea gravel and deadheading rhododendrons and windy Bandon to the north. And so we hatched this plan that we were going to have a pesto farm the next summer. At that point, we were both in school on the East Coast. So we came home for Christmas break and we planted garlic down in our bottom land. It turned out it was an El Nino year. And so the bottom flooded and the garlic rotted. And when we got out of school and home in May, we're like, well, no garlic. Why plant the basil? We obviously too did not have any notion of how we were going to market, process, create a product, right? It was your classic example of like a farmer with this great idea and absolutely no planning about the marketing and the food safety and the everything else that underpins it. So the pesto plan was squashed, and instead she used that ground and planted salad greens. And so she started Abby's Greens that summer in 98. And basically, my mom's famous quote as she was harvesting her first harvest was, "This is Curry County. No one's going to buy those yuppie salad greens." Like Curry. So for a little context, we are in the very southwestern corner of Oregon. It's very remote. It's very rural. It's highly impoverished in pockets. It tends to go red in elections. It's not your stereotypical foodie scene down here.
Right.
All that said, though, like I love the fact that where we live really is a very purple place, and there's a little bit of everyone here. And even no matter like what side of the political divide you might be on, everyone still eats, and a lot of our customers are. We feed everyone, it's something I love about here. It's really not just preaching to the choir in the food world. Anyway, Abby, who's, 20 years old and beautiful and has this lovely salad mix, she drives it to town and starts knocking on the back doors of restaurants and sells her salad no problem, and also gets a lot of marriage proposals, it turns out. We had to actually like give her a fake wedding ring one summer because she was getting propositioned so much by the back staff. Anyway, she developed this great following of this amazing, beautiful, high quality product that I think very quickly the chefs realized like this is, even if it costs a little more, it's worth it because it lasts 2 weeks longer and looks beautiful. All of that, like the quality was superlative. So that started Abby's Greens, and she basically would grow her greens through the summer and sell it locally. And then she had to go back to school in August because they started on the semester system. And so my mom at that point was like eating her words basically because Abby was successful.
Yeah.
Selling this salad mix in Curry County. And so she was like, well, I might as well finish out the growing season. So she took over Abby's tail end of her summer business. And then realized, well, there's demand for this all year round. So she put up some greenhouses and started growing what we jokingly refer to as Abby's mom's greens, which is the winter salad indoors in high tunnels. And then Abby would be back by May to take over again and do the summer season. So then my mom had all these greenhouses that were empty because there was no salad mix in them during the summer, which then inspired the tomato production and the basil and the peppers and all that stuff. So Abby's doing her salad greens. My mom's pulling stuff out of her greenhouses. They have little, carbon copy handwritten invoices. They load it into the back of the Volvo at the end of a harvest day and, drive it to Bandon and make the deliveries and then go to the swimming hole the next day and like kind of live this great combination of farming and gardening and living up the creek. So it was very much not a huge living, but certainly a living, and also left time for all the things we love to do in this part of the world. So when I came back, I had a bit more of a business plan and a big vision, and it rocked the boat in a lot of ways. And I think that everyone realized like, whoa, Zoe wants to work more and at a larger scale, and we still want to go to the swimming hole on Wednesday. And not necessarily be totally consumed by this big thing. So that was really acknowledging that was critical because it allowed us to design a system of collaboration where we all run our own businesses. So the three of us each have our own farm entity and file separate Schedule Fs for that. And then we created Valley Flora as a fourth entity, which is basically an umbrella entity that we market and sell all of our produce through. So it's also our brand. So to the general public, we are one thing. We are Valley Flora with this logo and this story and this website and all of that. But each of us grows distinct things. So Abby still does greens. She also does some melon production. My mom does all of the same, tomato, pepper, basil, zucchini, peak of summer, solanums and cucurbits, basically. And then I do everything else. So I do about 75% of the production that runs through Valley Flora. And then my sister does maybe just under 15%, and my mom, the remainder. My mom, by the way, is 71 years old, and she is still hauling buckets of tomatoes out of her greenhouses and
awesome.
Often gets mistaken for us from behind. So she loves that, of course. Or she was asked by someone who's not in the know, are you one of the sisters?
Oh, that's so sweet.
It is. She's a badass. Yeah. So then we use QuickBooks to sort it all out. So all of our items we grow are tagged in QuickBooks to an account, a sales account.
Okay.
Zoe, Abby, or Bets. We have a few more too, because now Abby and I each have 2 kids, and all of the kids have their own enterprise now on the farm. So,
oh my gosh, really?
My daughter grows gourds, and my other daughter grows watermelons, and my nephew grows pumpkins. And so it kind of has expanded the QuickBooks categories. Plus there's some additional ones. Like there's a few things that we still do collaboratively. The orchard, my mom and sister manage together. And then we have some other odds and ends like table grapes. And it's just kind of random, like things that historically started as all 3 of us together and still are managed that way, low key kind of. I mean, the table grapes are kind of a 2-week little side that happens. Blip. It's definitely a blip. But yeah, for the most part, things fall into those 3 main categories, Abby, Zoe, Bets. And then we just run a custom summary report at the end of the month, and we know what we all sold as long as things got invoiced correctly along the way, and we pay ourselves accordingly. So
okay. So do you have one bank account then that everything goes into first, and then you sort of pay out from there?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And to get into sort of QuickBooks nerdery, are you using accounts or are you using classes to sort?
Accounts for the sales. So my sister's honestly the right person to ask that question.
Okay.
He is the one. So that's the other side of managing this whole approach, is that the business still requires management, and it's not just one of ours, because Valley Flora is all of ours, but I'm, 75% of what runs through it. So each of us wears a different hat in terms of managing the business. My sister does all the bookkeeping. She actually has a side business as a bookkeeper in the winter.
Okay.
So she's amazing. She's really, really great. My mom does a lot of the receiving of payments and that side of the bookkeeping. And then I take care of all of the communications, our newsletter, our website, our social media. I'm the one who's filing taxes, dealing with insurance payments, things like that. So, and payroll, all of that. My sister runs the payroll. I write the checks and make sure the crew gets paid. So we've kind of divvied things up. And that is just really kind of based on where each of our skill set lies, I guess. And it works out, I think, fairly well in terms of number of hours that each of us has to put in those various capacities to be proportional to the percentage of business that each of us is doing. Through Valley Flora. But it's a little fuzzy. And there's always, I would say that in the outset of our setting up our business structure, the first 5 years, there were definitely tears and things to work out, right? Like this was new territory. And it was like, well, what is fair? What does make sense? So we had a lot more to hash out and chew on in the early years. Now I feel like the whole thing has kind of matured to this cruise control place where it works. And sometimes there's something new that pops up that we have to hash out anew. But for the most part, it's like, we have these systems. And it's a little bit comical. At the end of a year, we have what we call the Valley Flora Big Settle meeting, which is when my mom, sister, and I get together and we pretty much go through the entire year of income and expense and tease out what percentage of the expenses should be allocated to each of us. And the income has already been sorted by QuickBooks coming in. So basically expenses that you owe are determined by income that you earned.
Okay.
There's a pie
Interesting.
of 100% if you paid or earn 75% of the income, then you're going to cover 75% of the expenses. The only thing is that we have multiple sales channels and the expenses are different for
I was going to
sales
say
channel.
that seems a little bit like squishy.
All to say, it is quite a spreadsheet. It is. I mean, it probably would be hilarious for someone to be a fly on the wall at that meeting. But we've honed it. Like it's now like a day and a half to get it all figured out. It used to be like 3 days of but creating this spreadsheet and evolving it over the years has really enabled us to tease it out much more cleanly.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine too, this sort of setup requires a lot of everyone giving everyone else the benefit of the doubt and coming to the table with a shared goal of let's get this fair and right rather than what am I owed,
Yes.
Because it seems like that could get, I've just found that when personal relationships get involved with money, it can be real tricky.
Yeah, definitely. No, I feel like it's gotten better and better, honestly, not worse and worse, which I think is testament to that we've got a good model that's working well. And I mean, you said earlier that you've seen various collaborative efforts crash and burn. And I do think that, you kind of go into it maybe at the outset with rose-colored glasses, like, yay, we're going to farm together and it's going to be beautiful. And I go, oh boy. I think any really romanticized notion of any aspect of farming is destined to crash and burn.
Oh, yeah.
But in particular, the business side of it, because it is hard and it can be so lean at times. And it's for us, I think we all just are happy we have this structure that we fall back on that sorts it for us for the most part.
And you both have partners. Are they involved in the farming at all too, or is it really just the matriarchy?
My stepdad, John, is not, no. I mean, no. I mean, I would say yes, in the sense that obviously they support us farming. And that's a big thing because farming, as probably most people who are listening to this know, is pretty all-consuming a lot of the time. So just to have a partner who green lights your passion for it is a big thing unto itself. There are definitely certain aspects, like my stepdad, just earlier this week, we had to pull our irrigation pumps out of the river before this next big rain arrives. And there were some fallen trees that were in the way of where the whole pump needed to come out of the river. And so he got in there with the chainsaw and bucked up all the logs and made a path for us, which was something that I couldn't have done in the amount of time we had before the storm, because we had to harvest and deliver and get everything else done. And it's like, I mean, we're going to be bucking logs in the dark. So in that sense, like there's a lot of peripheral support that some of the partners in our lives provide. But when it comes to running the business, doing the farming, all of that, no, they all have their own thing.
It's your career. They have their own.
Yeah. And I feel like in a lot of ways, it's all very mutually supportive, but distinct.
Yeah. So we already have gone over a little bit about, you have basically all the typical outlets, it sounds like, for a vegetable farm, right? You have the farm stand, the CSA, restaurant sales, but also, as you mentioned, you're in a very remote, low population based area. So how you talked about this earlier, obviously your sister's charm maybe helped establish the business, but I'm sure that there's a lot more to that than that. Obviously, the consistent quality. But how did you build up all these different marketing bases in a place so far from a major metro area? Like when you came on board, it was more than salad greens now. So what did that look like growing the CSA in this area? I mean, 130 members is great for a city farm.
Yeah.
And you're in a much smaller area.
Well, I definitely feel like my sister Abby deserves credit for establishing a certain level of quality, an expectation of quality synonymous with our name. She just has always had a very loyal following. I mean, she's had certain accounts for 20 some years at this point who will always get her product because it's superior. And I think that set me up really well. Like I get to kind of ride her coattails in a way, because when I returned, it was really more of a build out on something pre-existing than I'm a brand new farm and you've never heard of my name. And I think also it helps that it is a really small community. And so a lot of the people that are our customers knew us as little kids, Right? Like the Langlois Market, which is our little general store here in town, Lee Pastana, who owned the place and has now passed it on to his son. If you were on honor roll, he would bring you lunch and a milkshake from the market as a way to celebrate your straight A's. And so a lot of the people have known us for a long time. And I think realize like, okay, they're not culls. These are good kids and they work hard, whether it was academically or now in the fields. So that helps for certain. But I think part of the success was not trying to grow the farm beyond our market, not trying to be a big farm that then has too much production and therefore needs to figure out some far-flung market that requires a lot of driving or shipping or transport. And also potentially like more barriers to entry because you're entering a market that doesn't know you anymore. So kind of keeping it local, our market reaches as far south as Brookings and as far north as Coos Bay. So that's sort of 50 miles plus in either direction. And it is pretty sparsely populated. However, there's still people and they still will appreciate fresh food. I think maybe the other thing that's helped us is that, well, two other things. It's really hard to get good fresh produce on this corner of the coast because we're so far. We're sort of, just over the California border, so you don't necessarily get that distribution. And then we're at the very end of the line for anyone coming down from the north. And, there's not a lot that comes over from the Rogue Valley or the Willamette. So there's just not a lot of options. And there really aren't very many or any other produce farms here doing what we're doing. So certainly there's not an oversaturation of production from a collection of farms doing it. There are some other small scale operations that have a little farm stand, or maybe they go to the farmer's market, those kinds of things. But I guess all of that has added up to us being able to pretty much sell everything we grow. And that's great because that's definitely, none of us like waste, and wasted energy, wasted food, wasted effort, all of that. Sad, wilty bunches of kale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, we've just sort of dialed it in and figured out how much can we grow to feed this place. And in some cases, it's not enough of certain things. And I don't know, some of our CSA members probably say there's too much eggplant in September. But other than that, I think it's fairly balanced, the supply and demand from our place.
Yeah, that sounds so great. Your nice little corner of the world, and enjoying being there.
I can't say that the market does fluctuate. I think that's one of the beauties of having a really diversified set of sales channels is that during COVID, for a lot of people, the restaurant industry tanked, but the CSA demand and our farm stand demand went through the roof. And now that seems to be sort of settling back so that there's a little more restaurant again, and just about the same CSA, but maybe lower farm stand, or, it seems to always work out in the end, but by the grace of diversified sales channels, really. I wouldn't want to have all my eggs in any one of those baskets.
Right.
Every year it's a little different.
It's the same product. You just push around where it goes, right?
Yeah.
The zucchini can go here or here.
Yeah.
And it's because it is the beach. Is there a tourism industry that's helping to support those restaurants too? Or are there a lot of visitors to the area?
Yeah. And it's pretty seasonal. I would say that, June through September is when we feel that pulse and added demand, but then it really quiets down. So it goes pretty dark. And that's when you're so glad that you've got this local following of CSA members and farm stand folks who aren't just there for the you pick strawberries and the sugar. They're there to get their kale and their turnips and their all the other things. It's great. Like, it's fine with us that it slows down a little bit at this time of year and into the winter because we need a break too. So you're kind of hoping that the orders aren't going to be as big and crazy on a given harvest day.
And sorry if I missed this. I know you harvest year-round. Does the CSA itself run year-round too?
Yeah, we have 2 seasons. So our quote-unquote summer season is June through December. And then we take a month off through the holidays. We come back mid-January and do a winter season from mid-January to May. And that's an every other week schedule as opposed to every week. And it's half as many members.
Okay.
So it's scaled way back. It gives us a little more flexibility in the winter.
So you do get some more rest time and
Yeah.
time
And,
to work on your infrastructure and things
right.
like that.
I know it's so funny. I mean, I'm sure all farmers can relate, but I always look ahead to winter and think of it as this endless, boundless time of extra time. And it usually just feels just as busy in a different way, but certainly like packed. And it's because of that. Yeah, there's a lot of improvements going on. Or if you do decide, to take a trip or go on a vacation, it compresses everything on the other side of that. So suddenly, oh, I'm leaving for 3 weeks. I better get the seed order done and all of this taken care of. And then you get back and you're playing catch up like, So it's just always busy. I think I've finally reckoned with that. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think anytime you have year-round harvest, it's a little like that. I mean, maybe it's that way for farms that have a real winter too, because they do other things. But certainly here in a milder climate, it's not like, oh, now we stop.
yeah,
No.
we didn't always do winter. It actually was something we added in 2017, I think. And it was because I was building a new propagation greenhouse that I just needed to earn some more money to pay for it. And so we decided to do winter, and it was such a hit. People, I mean, like our winter customers are so grateful, it's like more so even than summer because they don't have their own gardens for the most part. And, it's just that much more precious to get this box of fresh, vibrant food in the middle of February. And I think we also realized like, well, in a lot of ways, you've done a lot of the work for winter
Yeah.
in the summer and fall before. And so it's like a lot of it's in storage, a lot of it's out in the field, but fairly easy to get. I mean, there's certain days where you're slogging hard, like losing money out there because it's taking so long or the quality's not there, whatever. But yeah, I didn't know that starting winter would mean that from then on I'd be doing winter, but we seem to not be able to stop now. So it's helpful income. It makes our customers really happy. And also feeds us. Like we're all stoked to get that big, beautiful head of cauliflower out of the field in early Feb. And
Right. Because what are you going to do? Grow a tiny winter garden for yourself?
exactly.
On top
No.
of everything else?
So
No,
much
that just.
easier to farm 6 acres instead.
Yes. I mean, it sounds bonkers, but it's so true. Yeah, it's 100% true. What about finding employees in your area and retaining them, or making sure they have housing? What's that like in your area?
That I would say prior to some of my concerns about climate change, I'd say that has been the biggest challenge. I've been very lucky, like since over 13 years, I've had an employee who started with me on the heels of kind of an employee disaster where I had hired someone. I was pregnant. I had hired someone who had committed to a 2-year stint and was going to spend the year I was pregnant basically training in and then really be there for me in that second year to help carry the load while I had a newborn. She ended up leaving in August of that first year and left me high and dry.
And you were pregnant at the time?
I was pregnant, and it was one of those things though where like catastrophe ends up equaling opportunity. And my midwife, family connection through my midwife introduced me to this man, Roberto, who came to work for me. Within a couple of weeks, he was on board. And I remember he didn't even know what kale was. He had never seen a lot of the vegetables we grow. He grew up in Guanajuato, Mexico, and had been here since he was 13, but had been working as a brush picker and as, in construction. So a lot of what we did was new to him. So I think I started him at minimum wage, and literally within a week, I'd given him a $3 an hour raise because he was so above and beyond amazing in his ability to learn and be quick and get the quality. And it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. So he's still with me. We've worked together for 13 years now. And to the point where I've often said, geez, when Roberto is done, I might have to be done too. Like, I can't imagine doing this without him. He's such a partner in it and such a joyful, beautiful human. And he makes you feel like anything's possible. He really has that kind of attitude that he brings to work. And I'm deeply grateful to him every day. So he really helped turn the tide as far as needing help. And at that point, it was scaled so that he and I could really do it. And we did for many years. It was just the two of us doing my part of the production. And then right before COVID, I think he told me that he thought he was gonna leave the next season. And I had to go on a soul search, like, uh-oh, do I need to rethink everything? Like, what we have built is so built with him, and assuming he's there to help carry it on. But I also knew, like, well, if I have to if I have to replace him, I'm gonna have to hire 2 people because there's no replacing him with one. So I started looking for help, and I ended up finding 2 people locally, kind of serendipitously, who ended up being great hires stayed with me for a few years. Roberto changed his mind. He decided to stay on board, but scale back. So instead of full-time, he works 3 days a week. And one of the other folks that I hired to replace him, that was right when COVID started, he's still with me. And it turned out, even though Roberto didn't leave and I hired 2 more people, that was the year to have the help, because we had so much business during COVID that we really needed all hands on deck. So anyway, that kind of was a turning point, because since then the crew has grown a little bit and morphed to be a lot more than just me and Roberto. So right now I have 5 employees, and they work for a combination of hours for Groundswell Farm, which is the name of my farming entity, and Valley Flora. So a couple of them are, when they're working the farm stand or doing deliveries, they're working for Valley Flora and being paid by Valley Flora. Whereas when they're in the fields, harvest, pack, wash, all that, they're working for Groundswell and they're getting paid by me. So I think Groundswell has 3 full-time people when you divvy it out by labor hours. The 2 people that we hired this year came on board through Rogue Farm Corps. So we became a host farm with that organization this year, and it's been really great, to the point where, like, the people we hired, we might not be able to host any new people next year, because we're probably going to keep the folks that we hired. The quality of the applicant pool that they put before us was wonderful and diverse and highly committed. So right now we're working with a pretty stellar team of folks that love the farm and I think want to stay there, which is amazing, because normally we're coming out of a season already kind of chewing our fingernails, like, okay, how are we going to plug these holes next year with these certain jobs and people? And it's just difficult down here to find folks that are serious enough about it, who, if they think they want to do it, actually really do once they start doing it. Because there's always that moment when they wake up and go, oh, this is really hard.
Yeah, that whole romantic notion again.
Rich.
Yeah. The people you got from the Rogue Farm Corps, are they from the area, or did they move to the area?
And they're not. One of them's from Massachusetts. And
wow.
And the other originally from Wisconsin by way of Salt Lake City and California. So that has also been one of the hiring challenges always, is like, our community is small and rural, and there's not a ton of necessarily like young people.
Right.
I mean, there's a handful. I mean, I don't know if I get to call myself one anymore, being in my 40s, but there's definitely, from my perspective, a great, vibrant community of folks. But there's also, it like highly skews towards retired on the coast. And so that can be hard socially for someone who's moving in with no prior connection or people here. And housing, you had asked about that, is also tricky. The cost of housing has gone up a lot, and just availability, there's not much. So I'm sure that's the story just about everywhere these days, but it seems to be particularly tricky around here. We got lucky this year. We had a farm customer who had a tiny house they had just finished and offered it up to see if any of our crew might want to rent it. And so it was a good fit for one person. And it worked out so that everyone had good housing, not just sort of like, I'll camp in my truck and it'll be great.
Oh my gosh. No.
Just so many reasons. No.
Yeah. I know we've often had people who are like, I'll park my trailer on your farm. And this is an Oregon thing, but it's not actually legal to live like that in Oregon on rural land because of our farm zoning, which is a whole other conversation. I disagree with that. But there's limitations to what some farmers can do to host people and still be above board legally, which, you can do whatever you want as long as neighbors don't complain generally. But that's tricky. Housing is tricky right now.
And then there's just like the R&R aspect of being able to go home to a comfortable place where you could really rest, recover, take a shower, maybe do your laundry even, cook a meal, those kinds of things, especially now as we head into fall and it's starting to be cold and wet. It is better to have a real roof over your head in Oregon.
Yes, especially as an atmospheric river is moving our way.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let's switch gears to another one of the sources of labor on your farm. You work with draft horses, and you have since the very beginning, right? So this is we'll have a whole category of things that people romanticize about farming that is probably a little bit trickier in reality. I would put draft horses in that category. I feel like I've known so many people who are so into the idea of that, and the number of farms that are able to make that work over the long run seems like a small select group of people. So let's talk about that. Like, why draft horses, and how have you made that work? I mean, at the end of the day, do you just love horses so much?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's what carries people through who make this work. It's basically like, I love horses.
I love horses. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's this picture, black and white photo that my mom took of me when I was 2 years old. And I think this was the moment when she was running around the house frantically because she couldn't find me. And she thought I had fallen down the composting toilet and was like,
oh, shoot.
down
Oh, gosh.
in black quagmire below the house. And instead, she found me out in the corral, sitting on the ground underneath the feet of 4 horses, just staring up at them in absolute awe. At that time, she had some horses boarded at the place. And yeah,
also a terrifying place to find your young
but
child.
It was my idea of heaven. I was like right where I wanted to be. So I was born the horse nut in our family. My mom is allergic to them. My sister's never been into them. And I just, as a little girl, toy, plastic horse figurines, all of that. And then when I was 9, I finally got my first horse, and it was my everything. And I spent a lot of my childhood on that horse, trespassing everywhere all over this lot. We didn't have a horse trailer or a truck. I mean, my mom, it was not her thing. So the horse got dropped off, and that's then where every ride had to begin from at our place. So on the weekend, it would be like a 2-hour trek on pavement out to the beach to get to the trails there. Or it would just be cut through a fence and find an old logging road and cross the creek, and crazy wild adventures. Usually my dog and my horse and a pack of uncooked ramen that I would eat raw out on the trail. Horses really like it too. It turns out it's sort of a crunchy little salty snack for them.
Oh my gosh.
Oh gosh, I know. So yes, I loved horses. I had them in my life as riding companions until I went off to college. And then just as I circled back, 15 years went by without having horses in my life. And I really wanted them back in my life. But I knew also as I headed into a career of farming that I knew how busy I was going to be. And I knew I wouldn't honestly have that much time to ride at the end of a 12-hour farm day.
Right.
So I started fantasizing about what if I could incorporate them into my workday and have horses be part of my farming. And I actually had a vision when I was in my late teens of me behind a team of drafts in the long evening light with the shadows and this floppy straw hat, driving a team of horses down along that bottom where the farm now is and where I now do that. And I don't know where the vision came from. It's not like I had ever been around a teamster or horses in harness. I had no experience with any of that. But I had a friend named Laura Masterson of 47th Avenue Farm. World famous, in my opinion, Laura.
I should get her on the podcast eventually.
Definitely. You definitely.
Yeah, and listeners should know that she is my kitty corner neighbor.
Yeah.
like right across the way where I live.
She's one of my favorite people on earth. Anyway, Laura had a similar life story with horses, and herself had the same epiphany and had connected with a teacher, a mentor in Montana, Doc Hamill, who taught workshops. And she had done workshops with him and another man named Don Uring, and basically connected me with him. And I had a summer between grad school and going back to farming when I decided to totally dedicate that to exploring the idea. Is this really something I want to do? And if so, what does it take? And so I reached out to Doc Hamill, and I was kind of poor, had been farming for 3 years and then had been in grad school. So I had $0 to my name and I couldn't afford one of his workshops. So I pitched the idea of a work trade. I said, what if I came for the summer and I just did anything you wanted me to do and I'll try to absorb everything I can while I'm there? And he said, okay. So I drove out to Glacier, Montana to his ranch. And I spent a summer there pulling noxious weeds and oiling harness and fixing a barn and whatever he needed. And then whenever there was a workshop happening with paying customers, I could sort of shadow and support however he needed. And then sometimes we'd get one-on-one time as well. And we developed this wonderful friendship during that summer. And the next summer, he invited me back just for fun. Like, just come and we're going to play with horses the whole time. And so we did that. It was, a shorter visit that second summer. And after that second summer, he said, I grant you, I give you my blessing to find your own team and do this. Like, I think you can do it. Because there's a lot to working with horses in harness with farm behind them. There's the whole communicating with horses, just period, whether you're on the ground, whether you're in the saddle, whether you have them hitched up. But then there's all the equipment, and then there's the farming itself. So there's so many layers to it. And I mean, I feel like he gave me his blessings, maybe not prematurely, because there's a certain amount of, you just have to learn by doing at a certain point, right?
Yeah.
But I certainly was not fully equipped yet to do it completely safely and completely well. So it's been a journey. I mean, I'm like, 17 years in working with giraffes at this point, and I still feel like I'm learning something new every single day and fine tuning and honing. I'm a lot better now than I was then. But I give a lot of thanks to my horses themselves for teaching me that, and to people like Flora, who have also been mentors, and the whole community. There is, believe it or not, a community of people farming with horses in the Northwest. And we try to gather and learn from each other and share tips. And equipment. Equipment's tricky because horse-drawn equipment, you're either pulling it out of a blackberry thicket.
Right. It's like somebody's yard art.
Yeah, de-rust it, or hopefully you're getting it from the east side where it hasn't rusted, or you're shipping it from Amish country across the country at crazy freight rates. So you can buy new horse-drawn equipment because the Amish are actively and successfully farming, and they are engineering new tools. And it's amazing, really, the stuff that they're building. But it's just hard to get your hands on if freight is a big obstacle. So yeah, that first decade was really about sort of acquiring my quiver of tools and equipment. The team that I bought originally, I worked for a number of years, and then one of the team died. So I worked single with the remaining horse. She's now retired, still on the farm, but I got a new team 6 years ago of Belgian Morgan crossbreds. So they're kind of the dream team, because at that point I was really excited to farm with a team again, and we were doing an expansion on the farm. So I was able to design things so that more crops were single row planted, which allows me to straddle row cultivate with horses a lot more easily. But these horses are slightly smaller than a full Belgian draft, which is what I started with, which is like a 1-ton horse.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So big.
But these crossbreds are also very rideable, and the team I got was already broke to ride. And so it's been really sweet because they're wonderful in harness. They do a lot of things on the farm that actually a tractor couldn't do, just based on places we can get into that are tight, or timing, or spacing. But they also have sort of allowed me to fulfill this lifelong dream I always had of taking wilderness pack trips on horseback. So my friend Laura and I go as often as possible with my 2 horses, and just take our lightweight backpacking gear and the 2 horses, and we have to find grass along the way. And we've taken some extraordinary trips into the Wallowas and the Trinity Alps and Indian Heaven and Jefferson Wilderness. And it's become, as much a reason to have these horses as the farming. And I think also speaks to the evolution of owning the business and running the business, and that, we took a whole week off in the middle of the summer and went to the Trinities, and then we took a whole other week off in September and we went to the Wallowas. And it's been great, to testament to the great crew that has grown up at the farm and the place we're at, so that I'm finally able to say, okay, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to step away and go do this other thing that feeds my soul. And I mean, obviously it's been a long time coming. It's like you have to put in 20 years to get to that point, but it's great. The whole journey is, I feel like, been a wonderful evolution, and every day you are learning something new, whether it's with the horses or with the plants. So
Yeah, to be able to take a summer vacation is a real marker of a farm's sustainability and maturation. What tasks do you do on the farm with the horses? You mentioned cultivating single rows. What other kinds of tasks are you doing?
it's very seasonally dependent, but they spend a lot of time hitched to the straddle row cultivators in June, July, August. So that's basically one horse on either side of the tongue, which they're hitched to. And then behind them is this great little contraption that's kind of like any weeder that you might pull behind a tractor. It's got sweeps on it, or hilling discs, or two big wagon wheels that go in the pathways, and the horses are walking in the pathways in front of those wheels. And then all of your setup is kind of right below you, kind of like on an Alice Chalmers G.
Oh yeah, on a G.
I actually had an electric G, and when I got this team, it sat in the barn unused for a whole year, and then I sold it because the horses had totally replaced the G.
That's awesome.
And for me, I'd much rather maintain a horse than a bank of batteries. So
then do you slightly steer to get the precision? Yeah. Okay.
There's foot pedals that allow you to shift right and left. And then obviously you're driving your horses too. So you're keeping an eye out there. And it's kind of infinitely adjustable. It's all very basic nuts and bolts. So, I'm personally not into engine repair and maintenance, but I don't balk at all at, dealing with the kind of very mechanical repairs that the horse-drawn equipment puts before me. They also, hilling discs on that, also sweeps and chisels. I have a sickle bar mower, so I mow cover crop with them, or farm road. I've got a cultipacker, which they pull a lot in the fall when we're doing all our cover cropping. So we tend to cover crop by first broadcasting our seed and then coming back and rolling over it with the horses to get really good soil to seed contact instead of a grain drill. And then let's see, potatoes are big. We open all of the furrows for planting with the horses, and then we use the hilling discs to cover them. And then we have a potato digger to harvest them all with horses.
Oh, that's also horse-drawn? Okay.
Yeah. So the potatoes are pretty fun because it's a half acre of production almost, and it's mostly horse production. Once they've lifted the beds and pulled the spuds, we have to have people come in and pick them up. But other than that, it's very much horse focused. We've got we also have single row tools. So single row cultivators, if you want to just have a single horse in harness and get through a pathway. I'm forgetting stuff. Oh, compost spreading.
This is a good list.
Yeah. The thing that people always say, do you plow with your horses? And that's actually the one thing I don't do.
I was going to ask, so what do you use your tractor for then? Because this is a very long list.
Yeah, I don't plow with the horses. And the reason is that typically for us, especially in the spring when we're trying to open up ground, we get these really narrow windows. I think you know it well. In Oregon spring, it's like you're really waiting for things to dry out. And then once it finally has, you may only have literally like 24 hours before the next storm is going to saturate your ground again. And to open up as much ground as you need to in that moment and not do damage, I can't do it fast enough with two horses who are coming out of winter out of shape. So they're soft,
right,
with a 6-inch or 9-inch plow. So that's when I get on the tractor and I make stuff happen as fast as I can. So I've really left a lot of the primary tillage to the tractor. And I've made peace with that because I started in with the romanticized notion that I was going to be all horse and not need a tractor. And I just came to terms with the fact that in growing this farm, I've also raised 2 daughters. I am wearing many hats. There isn't enough time in a day to nurse the baby, make the meal, pack the snacks, do the farming, manage the crew, and somehow flip all your ground with a 6-inch plow. Yeah, with the baby on your back. So,
yeah.
No, I give myself a break and use a little tractor. So yeah, at this point, that's kind of the balance, is that I use that tractor for tillage, and then I use the horses for as much of the rest of it.
Okay. Yeah, I saw on your Instagram, there's a good number of cool videos just of you out there doing something with the horses. It does look so peaceful compared to riding any kind of mechanized equipment?
I feel like riding the tractor for me is something where I want distraction when I'm doing like a book on tape, an audiobook or something like, oh, I kind of dread my tractor time. But working with horses for me is actually meditation. It's the most present that I ever am in a day because I have to be very aware and awake and in the moment with them because, a lot can go wrong when you've got a mower hitched to a team of horses and they spook and run off. So being absolutely keenly tuned to every flick of the ear and their energy and my own energy because they feel me. And if I'm in an elevated, adrenaline state, they're going to go there with me. So I feel like it's an amazing practice, a sort of mindfulness practice with them, which is very different than grinding along with the loud earphones on and not that one can't also be mindful and meditate on a tractor, but
it's definitely different. Yeah. And the tractor doesn't really care about our mood in the same way. So obviously farming with horses is a really important growing choice that if it sounds like for you is a combination of sustainability goal, but also just joy and personal preference of how you want to spend your time. But what other important choices have you or your family made about your particular growing methods on the farm? And what have been some big successes in meeting sustainability goals?
Well, I would say that sustainability, having a small footprint, low impact have all been hugely important guiding principles from the outset. I mean, we definitely were raised with a really strong environmental ethic. And so I would say that almost all of our decisions are framed by that. One of the most exciting leaps forward was getting solar. So the whole farm is solar powered at this point. We have a 12 kilowatt array on the roof of our barn, and that runs all of our walk-in coolers and our greenhouses and our irrigation pumps. And we actually make more power than we use during the sunniest months of the year, which allows us to then draw that back in credit from the utility in the winter when we're not making as much. So that feels really, really good. I mean, obviously the horses for me are part of that. Also, I love cover cropping. I don't feel like this is like innovative or something special. I feel like all farmers I know and relate to do it. But for me, it's one of my favorite times of the year to do something so intentionally for our soil and for the health of the farm. And I love geeking out on different cover crop mixes and varieties and custom blends and every slot of every corner of every part of the calendar year. Like, what can I grow? What can I cover crop at this time of year? So I'm very adamant about trying never to have our ground bare for too long unless it's, an intentional bare or fallow for weed management or something. But yeah, I like to keep the place growing and green. It's a hard question. I mean, sometimes that like, what is the one thing? I guess overall, just a commitment to growth and innovation, always seeing where the place could be improved. What would be the little tweak we could make this season that would have a huge ripple effect next season? Sometimes that's just like a new kind of bin, pack out bin, or this year it was actually building a new walk-in cooler and a new equipment shed, which are two places where we've been kind of fighting our limited capacity to store storage crops in particular. So bringing in all the potatoes and other storage crops in the fall, they used to just get stuffed into the main walk-in. And then we would like be cursing our way through October and November because there's still so much other food coming in and there's nowhere to put it. And, so just gave ourselves a little more breathing room and everything is flowing. It's just flowing as opposed to cramming and fighting and dealing with, I think what we often deal with on our small farms, right, is like hard to afford to make those investments. But also building a new equipment shed for the same reason. So all of this stuff is also DIY. So, it takes a while. We started the shed in May and we'll be lucky if we get the roof finished by next week, which would be great. It would be great. But, it's just like 2 hours here and there on a random afternoon and drive a few more screws in. But that's how the place has evolved, really, just organically, no pun intended, and as frugally as possible, which I think helps it succeed, honestly, that we have, thanks again to my mom and her ability to drive a nail or fire up the chainsaw or whatever, like we have the skill set to get up on that ladder and and build it when we need it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you, I suppose the positive side of waiting until you really, really need something. I mean, this is sort of an obvious thing is, you need it. That's great. I mean, I guess that's almost like a tautology, but yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, right? Then you're not like, should we build the tractor shed? It's like, no, we need this equipment shed. It's just a matter of making it work in the time and money budget, And I do love that feeling then when you finally do that thing you've probably needed for a couple of years. It's very, very satisfying.
There are moments too when hindsight, like for instance, I think about my propagation greenhouse that I built, which was the new and improved one 6 or 7 years ago. And we actually poured a slab for that and made it like pretty legit. It's a rigid polycarbonate with automatic vents and various thermostats. And like, it's one of the more high-tech things we've got going at the farm. And I realized that if only I had somehow managed to do that the very first year, because what I realized is that, before I'd been dealing with just like a hoop house and it had a weed mat floor. And over the years, the weed mat just wore these troughs down in from all of the paths that we walked continuously in there. And then a little slimy and slippery. And sometimes when it was wet and the little toddler would fall down and start crying. And you're like bouncing the baby here, trying to put the seeds in the tray over here. And as soon as I had that slab, all of a sudden, my girls and my sister's sons were suddenly just riding bikes and trikes and like every wheeled thing in circles around all the greenhouse tables. And I thought, oh my God, I'm pretty sure that all the money we spent on childcare or like lost opportunity because we were bouncing, crying babies
oh my gosh,
equal the cost of the slab, right? Like easily the $7,000 that I put into a slab, it was a wash. So if only I had known, I could have had that greenhouse like 10 years sooner and childcare built in.
Yeah, but you can't know, right?
Can't.
I mean, that's the process. And even if you knew that, if you didn't have the money,
right,
it doesn't matter, right? Yeah, we're in a position where we probably need to update our prop house. It's very familiar what you were describing. We have weed barrier down. It's a high tunnel, which ours hasn't gotten squishy and slippery, but oh, Zoe, the blackberries we remove every year.
I know. Well,
I'm in a similar boat. Like all the time we have spent removing blackberries, we could have just put in a slab.
Slab. I think it's maybe a vote for letting yourself dream big every now and then. Because I think oftentimes on small farms, we have to constrain some of our dreams because of financial reasons or maybe time and labor, But I realize that I have sort of saddled myself with that way of approaching things. And every now and then when I break through that and think like, okay, wait, really? Let's really think about this. Let's really think about
what do I really need?
Let's really think about now. Sometimes I think I do it to myself almost because I think like, oh no, I don't deserve that. Or, oh, we can get by. Like we're used to coping with.
And it's a little bit tough feeling too, right?
Right. That's what it is to be a small farmer, right?
I'm tougher because I have this makeshift prop house.
Right. Oh gosh. I don't know. I think like that greenhouse was a great example of actually building something bigger than I needed at the moment.
When you built the new one.
Yeah. And this equipment shed is also bigger than, I'm not quite sure. We're like, well, what will I put in that corner? I don't know. I'm sure I will find something very quickly. And then
I have no doubt.
Twice as big.
I'm going to call you next spring and you'll be like, oh yeah, Katie, day 2. There was something parked there.
But yeah, dreaming big. As long as you're able to then balance it with, okay, like you don't want to make yourself bankrupt because you dreamed too big in the moment. You have to, You have to be smart about that. But yeah.
I wrote an article years and years and years ago for Growing for Market about pretty basic farm infrastructure. Like if you're thinking about a wash station, here's 3 different levels of permanence that you could think about, right? Because like we had the experience of getting on some rented land in March and wanting to have a season that year, right? So what does it look like to set up an ad hoc wash station, which obviously would not be the wash station you want for the rest of your life. But if you're going to be at a June market and you have 3 months plus all the seeds to start, greenhouses to plant, what can that look like? But one thing I did put in that article was, the makeshift solution is sometimes just what you need to do, right? Because of finances or time, but be very conscious that on a farm with a lot of moving parts, the makeshift solution is likely to last much longer than you think it is. Like, if you have met that need, whether it's a wash station or a prop house, the pressure to do something more official kind of goes away, in a series of busy seasons. So it's sometimes stepping back, like what you did with your prop house, and saying, okay, this is technically working. I could keep doing this, but I'm going to step back and reassess this piece of infrastructure, and is it ideal? But that's the winter work, right? That's the having the mature enough farm that you can pause. But it's hard. It's legit hard to do that, stepping back and reassess, and to then budget the time and the money in that next growing season to improve. It seems like it's often worth it, but it's so hard.
I've really appreciated The Lean Farm as a book. It's funny when people start with me for the first time, I give them two things. I give them foundation training, which is this body ergonomics thing that I've been doing to keep myself strong and going for a long time. But I also give them The Lean Farm. And I say, if there's two things you're going to read as you get going with me, I suggest these two. And I think The Lean Farm has been so great because I'm inherently like systems thinking and I like smart systems. So that book really resonated for me and was also permission to do the other things like make it shine, keep things clean, things that sometimes I think you let go of because there isn't time, or you just don't prioritize. In my case, because I'm like, oh, is that just me? Am I just being like nitpicky? But no, like it really changes the whole energy of your place and the pride of place. And then of course the food safety and all the other things that really matter for other reasons. So anyway, a little pitch to Ben Hartman, because
yeah.
A great book.
I'm interviewing you in November, and next week we have an interview with Ben Hartman coming out.
Oh,
because he has a new book out. So I didn't do the interview, but I'm excited to listen to it and to read the book.
Good.
So I should reread The Lean Farm though, too. It's been a long time. I read it right when it first came out and remember feeling like it was really great insight into that big system. How do you think about all your farming systems so that they run together in a cohesive way that's profitable, sustainable? Yeah, definitely recommend it. Yep. Speaking of books, before we end the podcast interview, I want to talk about the fact that you helped make a book come into the world, let's say about a decade ago now. So you helped edit and solicit contributions for this book that's 50 different essays from farmers from all over. It's called The Greenhorns, 50 Dispatches from the New Farmers Movement. Can you just tell us about that book and the experience? How did that come about? And what was it like working on such a big project with so many different people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, everyone should know that you have a fabulous essay in that book. I just revisited it actually. And that farm you were starting in March on rented land, that was partly what it was about, right? It was trying to get your greenhouse built and have Casey not blow away in the windstorm. And
yeah.
Anyway, Katie's a great writer, everyone. So you should read her stuff whenever you can. That book, that was a fun project. Severin von Schreiner-Fleming from the Greenhorns and Paula Manolo, who farmed down in California. We came together and basically, I think it started really, Severin's idea was to write more of a how-to, and it morphed into how about just personal stories? Because everyone who's doing this crazy thing of trying to start a farm or in the beginning phases of it has got a lot of stories. And a lot of times they're very instructive. We have this great listserv mostly now, but group in the Northwest called the Pacific Northwest Farmer to Farmer Exchange. And we used to always gather once a year at this hot springs in the Cascade Mountains. And my favorite part about that gathering every year was the session that was titled Ahas and Uh-Ohs. And it was basically where everyone went around the big circle of 70 some people and said, what was your one, either aha for the season or your uh-oh for the season. And always there was like a very good story typically behind those tellings and really useful information. And I feel like in some ways the Greenhorns book was pulling out ahas and uh-ohs from these various beginning farmers around the country. It was definitely quite a project. I myself love to write. I don't love editing other people's writing as much, is what I discovered. I feel like writing's such a personal thing and personal voice. But sometimes as an editor, you have to like get in there in a pretty big way and help tweak and tune it up. So that was challenging, but it was so fun to get all these submissions from people all over and really get this raw glimpse at what people are going through and doing all over in different farm capacities. The timing was tricky. I had a newborn. My first child had recently been born when we were really working hard at that book. And it was a lesson in, this is what too much is. I don't know if I'd ever really run up against that before, but I was running my own farm and I had this like month-old baby and I was in all these, like deep brainstorm sessions with Paula and Severin, like in my living room, trying to hash through things. And in my personal body, it manifested as just breast infection after breast infection. Laid flat, like with the flu because of stress and lack of rest. And so that was a real learning moment in lots of ways for me. Like, okay, I probably can't necessarily do it all at the same speed that I'm used to. But in the end, the book came out and it's out there in the world. I think I run into people sometimes who are like, oh my gosh, I love the greenhorns. That one story was so useful. Or, it was a fun project for us.
Yeah, I recently met somebody new a couple of months ago who was like, yeah, I know you because of this book. And I was like, that was not unexpected. I've written all these articles for Growing for America and all these other things, but that was the way that they had first read something by me. So for our listening audience, this book came out over 10 years ago. So if you are newer to farming, it may not have hit your radar, but I definitely recommend buying a copy, finding it in your library, seeing if a friend has a copy and giving it a read, because it's 50 different real farmers' stories, and most of them from the early years of farming, but some are more mature farmers, and it takes on kind of all the different elements that you might experience. So some of them are very personal stories about relationships. Some are stories about something that went wrong or right on the farm itself. And it's very soulful. It's not, like Zoe's saying, it's not really a how-to, but it's more of a how does the heart and the brain and the person respond to how farming shapes a life? And I love it. With so many different voices in there, it just really helps give a full picture of the experience and the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing too, there could be version 2. I mean, there's always more stories and more dispatches from the field. So maybe every decade there needs to be another version. Because I think those stories are going to be changing as the world changes.
Oh, yeah. I know. I wonder how dated they might seem in some respects now, just because those were kind of before social media, for example, So,
and as climate gets more extreme, and I think, markets have shifted and the whole landscape of organics has changed. So anyway.
Yeah.
Someone needs a project.
Yeah.
Just so long as you don't have a newborn and are breastfeeding, I don't recommend that. But
so it sounds like, Zoe, you don't want to take this on.
Well, oh man. That's actually one thing I'm trying to figure out how to carve more time out for again, is writing.
Yeah.
I write every week for our CSA newsletter, but there's always been a slightly bigger project marinating in me. And now it's mostly a matter of figuring out, when does it get to hatch? When does it get to come out? So
yes, farming is a full-time occupation and you still have kids at home and you're doing a lot. Speaking of which, thank you for coming and making the time to chat. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience before we sort of close up? Or do you feel like you got to share it all?
Yeah, I talked too much and you're awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy you're doing this. It's great to have all these farmer voices getting out into the world and telling stories.
Well, maybe this is our rewriting of the Greenhorns. Our new version. It's just actually, this podcast.
That's perfectly appropriate given this day and age, the podcast era. So good on you.
And if people want to learn more about your farm or you, what's the best way for them to find you or reach you?
Oh, we have a website, valleyflorafarm.com. We're pretty bad in the social media department, so I wouldn't follow us or anything. If you're expecting like regular social media behavior. And definitely if you're expecting a response on social media, definitely don't, because
Okay.
I think of it as a one-way. I need to tell people that the strawberries are ready to be picked. So I likely won't return to see what anyone asked or said in response.
Okay, so the website's the best way if people want to learn more and connect with you.
We're kind of old-fashioned Luddite horse farmers, you know? Like, well.
I mean, that sounds pretty great to me. I love the beach, too. I don't know. That sounds pretty good. I'm especially going to think about you next summer when it gets to like 106 again in the valley. Be like, Zoe's out there with her horses, and it's cooler.
Well.
Oh, well.
May it not. Maybe we can still turn this boat around.
Mm-hmm. Either way, it'll be hotter at my farm every summer.
It's true.
It's true. Well, enjoy it and enjoy your winter rest. And again, thank you so much for sharing with all of us. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can now try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine subscription for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never get billed. Even the most basic subscription gets you a year of the magazine, plus 150 back issues from the last 15 years. Digital subscriptions start at just $30 per year. So head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers for farmers in Growing for Market magazine.